It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
This whole show is a tangent.
Cool. That's why I dig it.
Shazam.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Shari Alexander talks influence. Welcome to the podcast. A quick reminder before we start that the show has an app available on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon. And most importantly, this app is free. Get entire books and articles from past guests, as well as other extras, only via this mobile app. So go download it today. But on to today's guest, Shari Alexander. She is a master of influence. No, she's not a hypnotist, but she certainly understands the power of influence and how it is woefully underutilized in business. In part of her research, she has interviewed CIA agents, undercover law enforcement, con artists, interrogators, trial attorneys, and many other individuals who are highly skilled at influencing people. And she did this to find out how they influence and bring that information to the business world. She is an extremely interesting lady, and I'm going to have to be on my toes not to fall into her Jedi-like powers. So let's get today's guest, Shari Alexander. When people talk about influence, it seems like the people who do not have any are the ones that are so desperate to have it. I mean, it seems like you can smell the desperation off the people who are trying to be influential. When I find that the most influential people, it's not that they don't care about being influential, it's just not a priority. They're more interested in doing versus being influential. Well, explain the difference in how being influential and acting influential are not necessarily the same thing.
Very interesting take on that. So I'd say that everybody is influential in some form or fashion. I don't think that there's anybody who carries no influence whatsoever. It's just usually that people are limited in the techniques that they deploy when trying to be influential. Some people may use, elicit somebody's help, and then that's how they are influential, to get somebody's help. Others may be much more skilled and have a few more skill sets and be able to sell, thousands upon thousands of dollars in services. So I think everybody has some sort of influence on that scale, but the question is, how many techniques do you actually have at your disposal? I find that people usually only have like 2 or 3. And when there's a plethora of other options, then I think you can increase your influence by having more tools in the toolbox, so to speak. I think that some people do try too hard to be influential, but I don't think that that's where it really stems from. I think it's an insecurity of the situation. That's a lack of confidence. And for those people, then I might start them with more basic techniques and foundational learnings like body language and breath and listening skills. It all starts with listening and observing rather than talking and saying.
Yeah, because I think the first thing they try to do is, and this might be more the fact that we're both in the National Speakers Association, and so whenever I deal with someone who overtly talks about influence, they are speakers, and usually the ones who don't, like I said, don't really have much influence are the ones that seem to be pressing hard, trying to flex those muscles, and it's kind of comes off as awkward. And so you're right, they have a limited amount, and they're afraid they're not going to be taken seriously. But also they often mistake influence for manipulation and for coercion, all these other things. So can you tell us the difference between influence and manipulation first? Because I think often people think manipulation is influence.
Right. So you're actually almost referring to one of my favorite blog articles that I've written. It's called Separating the Four Horsemen: Influence, Manipulation, Coercion, and Persuasion, and the differences amongst those four. So influence and persuasion are kind of interchangeable in the concept behind those words. Manipulation means that you are getting or attempting to get somebody to do something, take action that ultimately could be detrimental to that person. So a con artist scheming somebody out of their money, that's manipulation. Are they using influential techniques? Yes, but it's the intent behind those techniques that makes it manipulative. Coercion specifically means that you are putting somebody under duress or the threat of being under duress, under some sort of physical harm of some sort. That's coercion. So that's starving somebody. That's keeping somebody in a dark room for a really long time. That's, tying somebody down. That's coercion. So influence itself and persuasion itself, it's just like a hammer. Hammer can hammer a nail to build a building. Hammer can also bash somebody's head in. It's not the tool that's the problem. It's the intent behind how the tool is used where issue comes into place. And that's actually where I got so fascinated behind this topic of influence, is because you think of the most influential people, like who's really skilled at getting somebody to do something? Well, oftentimes one of the first things that come to mind is con artists. And I think that there's something really wrong when a con artist knows more about influential techniques, and has a language around influence to create bad intentions in the world. And then on the other side of the spectrum, like a business leader or somebody who's running a nonprofit or an entrepreneur who's wanting to create positive influence in the world, doesn't have those tools in their tool belt. They don't have the same language or knowledge around influence. And so there is something really wrong with that. And that's the change and shift that I'm trying to create in our linguistic culture, if you like.
And my guest today is Shari Alexander, influence expert. And what are some of those tools? Because you keep bringing back the core 2 or 3, and I think most people just have the initial trust that they have with the person they know. And so that's where I think a lot of people's influence is being exerted, is because they have proven themselves over and over to a specific person that they're capable or they're knowledgeable or that what they're thinking makes sense.
Right, yeah. So the core 2 or 3 that I referred to before is that people usually have 2 or 3 that they naturally lean towards. There's actually, of the influential techniques, there's over 100 that you could choose from depending on which studies you believe and buy into. So the main process of influence is, and it's not surprisingly, is the name of my company. It is Observe, Connect, Influence. The first step begins with observation, and that is checking your own ego at the door and spending time focusing your conscious mind on the other person, not what you want, not what you're trying to get out of it, not what you're going to say next, but focusing on them. How are they behaving? What is the tone? What is the body language? What are the key words that they're sharing that could be used as influential triggers later in the conversation? After you go through all these observational techniques, then the next is to connect. Connect with that person, build the rapport, build the trust. And as you mentioned, that people have demonstrated that trust. I'll get back to that in just a second. And then the third is influence, so deploying those influential techniques that will help you hit a home run by the end of the meeting. When you refer to the trust and the rapport part, the reason why I think people still need to expand their knowledge about observation and connection is because it's really easy for me to develop strong rapport with somebody who is like me, somebody who is a little bit more of an extrovert, somebody who's an entrepreneur, somebody who is outgoing and articulate and all of those things. Very easy for me to create rapport with that person. It's more difficult if they're like, kind of shy and quiet and speak slowly. That's difficult. So I have to learn connection techniques so that I can build rapport with that person, because that shy person could be a multimillionaire who I'm hoping to do a business deal with. So people can develop that rapport and trustworthiness easily with people who are like themselves, but not all decision makers are like you. So you need to be able to build that flexibility for all different types of personalities and situations.
So why do you think the average person, when they hear the word influence, it's about a hit or miss? A lot of people think it's good things, and a lot of people have a negative connotation to it. Because when you were talking about con artists, when you were describing all these things, everything you said sounds perfectly for a cult leader. Someone who's charismatic, who finds people that they can connect with, makes those people feel important, and then brings them in, and now everybody's wearing the same Nike shoes and drinking Kool-Aid. So where the negative connotation come in? Is it just because people have abused the word influence, or is it because people have abused influence?
That's a great question, and it's one that I've kind of pondered, because people want to be persuasive, but they don't want to be persuaded. People want to be influential, but they don't want to be influenced. So it's this weird dichotomy that we have. I honestly don't know why influence has a negative connotation. Robert Cialdini wrote kind of the Bible on influence. I don't know, most of the studies were conducted in the 70s. I forget when the book originally came out. And what he did was he used, in addition to studies from the lab, he also pulled a bunch of examples of how influence was used in a manipulative way, like the Kool-Aid cult leader, as you described. And his intention behind the book was to highlight ways in which the bad people, quote unquote, could negatively influence you, and then give you the tools and techniques to have counterattacks, so to speak, to influence. I think his intention was good, but perhaps that might have put a little bit of a negative spin on that influential realm. But at the same time, his company is doing very well in teaching corporations on how to use influential techniques in an ethical manner. And that's the same thing that I do with my company, just with a different spin and take from the interviews that I've done with CIA agents and interviewed con artists and trial attorneys and hostage negotiators and all these people that use these techniques in a practical sense rather than just from a university psychology student lab.
And no cult leaders yet?
I haven't actually thought about the cult leaders. I'd be a little scared, not going to lie. However, I am in LA and Scientology is around the corner, so maybe I should give that a shot.
You're in LA. There is 15 cults within probably a 3-block radius of you right now, and they're all they're unaware of each other.
That's true.
Scientology's the easy one, but I know there's Moonies and there's all kinds of weirdos out in Los Angeles that are hidden behind these gated communities where they're so. But I think that's the more fantastic headline grabbing type of influence that probably people are exposed to. But you use it for ethical ways, and I think a lot of people think that only the CEO can use influence.
Oh no! Like there are just so many little tweaks and framing and ways to use these techniques that can make such a big difference. For example, I'm advising a startup out here in LA who has a beautiful mission, beautiful business model, all these great things, and they're getting funded. And so they sent me their presentation slide deck. And here are these people who are trying to create positive change. Their main focus is on improving wellness, health and wellness in the United States and ultimately globally. And they are wanting to create this positive influence, but then they send me their slide deck, and I'm like, oh. It's just they're missing all of these things, and it's not their fault. It's out of sheer ignorance.
Is it like going to a website built in 1995?
More or less. It's just the bullet points with a whole bunch of words. And as Jeffrey Gitomer says, make another slide. It's free. And just little things that they don't. And it's also how they frame the situation. They're not hitting emotional points. It's only logic based. And it's some simple things. And yeah, the advice I'm going to give them, I mean, it could be headline making news if and when they get fully funded. But in the meantime, it's not going to be this, cult leader shocking stuff, but it is creating a big impact in the world. Does that make sense?
Right. I mean, I think we're still stuck on the cult leader part, but what you're trying to do is hit people in the emotion. When you influence them is because they want to do it, not because you're forcing them to do it. And the way you want people to do it is because they feel like it's something they need to do. It's important.
Well, right, and it's mostly that, yeah, you look for what is important to them, and then you attach your influential intention to that value, to that perspective, to that need, to that desire, to that tendency that they have. So you won't know what to get up to until you go through those first observational techniques. So with the advice that I would give this startup, the first few questions that I asked after they sent me the materials was that they have this meeting with this multimillionaire female who's really excited and about the project. And
just not in general? She's just not excited in general kind of person?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't met her yet, but she's excited about the project. And so my first few questions were about her. Why is she excited about the project? How does she know you? How did she learn about this? What were the specific words that she told you? Because that is the intelligence gathering that everybody should go through before they have an important conversation, meeting, or presentation. Because trying to make something 100% cookie cutter when there's millions of dollars on the line is ridiculous. You want to customize the message to that person. Yes, there are things that can make the message generally appealing to the general audience, but if you want to hit a home run, then you need to gather the necessary intelligence and adjust your message accordingly.
Now, how do you do, I think it's called mirroring. How do you do that without sounding like a parrot?
So, okay, mirroring refers to a few things. Mirroring is, and it's difficult to explain on an audio recording because there's actually a body language mirroring component to it.
But there isn't there isn't a language mirroring or a parroting in this situation?
There is, and yes, it can be used poorly to where you sound like a parrot. But when you're talking with the person, and what I call it is you're looking for keywords. These keywords are words or phrases that when that person says them, their body language and tone and everything about them is highly congruent, meaning that you can see just this glimmer of excitement when they say these words. Usually, typically from a body language standpoint, their eyes will get a little bit wider. You can see more of the whites of their eyes. Their eyebrows will go up. Their volume will actually increase a little bit. They may even sit up a little bit straighter or lean in. For more auditory people, maybe even kinesthetic people, they might even hit the table when they say those words to really punctuate what they're saying. All of these are indicators that what they just said, they really freaking believe in. And so you don't repeat what they say right away, although that can be beneficial sometimes. But what you do is you make a mental note, okay, that's important to them. The word loyalty might be really important to somebody. I'm looking for somebody who's going to be loyal to this company, who's going to stay loyal to me. Loyalty is a big deal to them. So later on, when you're describing a project or yourself or your services, you might say, part of what I bring to the table is I stay really loyal to my clients. And that's why I put them through the process to make sure that we are a really good fit. Because once they become a client, I stay loyal to them and they stay loyal to me, kind of a thing. So you make these little mental checks of this is what is important to them, and then you attach your influential intention to those keywords or phrases.
Now, is there certain body language things that we think about? Because I think people talk about body language all the time, but some of them are very accurate, like their eyes light up, or like you said, their volume goes up, or maybe even starts to talk faster. But are there some tells that are really myth that people always talk about that are not actually true, but they always hear about?
Yeah. So a bunch of the discussion around the topic of lie detection gets really wonky. It's one of the reasons why it's a topic I don't teach very often, only to a very specific group of people who need it for a very specific set of situations.
Sound like you talk to Liam Neeson all the time. You've got a certain set of skills.
I have a very specific skill set. I will find you and I will kill you.
And I will extract the information from you.
Have you heard Michael McFarlane do the Kermit the Frog version of that speech?
Oh, he did that I think he did it on Graham Norton.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. I,
I
it's
love it.
it's very good. But you like you said, you were saying you don't teach lie detecting techniques very often because.
Okay, so because one of my favorite authors is he wrote the book What Every Body is Saying, Every Body, two different words is saying, by Joe Navarro. And he's a former FBI interrogator, and he really loathes the discussion of lie detection in a lot of ways. I think mostly because his background in it, people are already in a high stress situation when they're sitting in the interrogation room. And because of that whole physiological reaction to just sitting in the room, it makes lie detection actually pretty tricky. And a lot of studies have shown that even the best human quote unquote lie detectors get their lie detection, it's accurate or correct 50, maybe 60% of the time. It's still pretty much a coin toss.
It's like when you go to the doctors for blood pressure and they say, wow, your blood pressure's pretty high. And it's like, because you're going to stick me with needles and I'm worried about this. And so I can see where it's too easy to defeat.
Right. So some of the things, well, there is more and more interesting study about lie detection. And I think actually one thing that's interesting is we are better at detecting lies through if we close our eyes and only takes information through what we are hearing rather than what we see. So that's been an interesting study that, I forget which university did it, but we pick up on lies easier through our ears than through our eyes. So like a blind person will be better at detecting lies than a deaf person, which is kind of interesting.
I also think that a lot of people think they're better at detecting lies than they actually are, because I always hear people go, oh, I would never have fallen for that. And it's like, no, con artists work because you would fall for that, because you have secondhand knowledge. People like to think that they wouldn't. I can always tell when someone's lying. It's like, no, I lied to you 3 minutes ago. You have no idea.
Exactly. And I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head at the moment, but I think there's something that says that we lie like once every 7 minutes or something ridiculous like that every day. I don't know if it was that much, but it was a pretty staggering amount. But so when it comes to detecting lies, more research does come out about, I think, that more linguistic tells of how they said what they said is showing a little bit more promise in lie detection than actual body language. Because when you asked me before about myths, one of the big myths is that when somebody lies, then they'll scratch their nose. That may be true for one person. It may not. I think culturally most of us know it, so that leakage has kind of gone by the wayside. But the science behind it is that when we lie, generally we'll have a little bit of surge of adrenaline or blood pressure because we know that lying is bad and our body reacts to that. What happens is that blood rush and blood pressure and all that stuff that's going on creates this slight tingling sensation on the parts of our body where the nerve endings are closer to the surface, the sensitive parts of the skin. So the nose being one of them, the ears is another, why people might touch their ears when they've shared a lie. And also any sort of self-soothing gestures, like if people rub the top of their hands or rub their legs, rubbing of the legs is a common one. So any of those self-soothing gestures could indicate a lie. The whole point of body language or the whole point of lie detection isn't looking for one singular thing. You have to look at the whole cluster and the whole situation. So after they touch their nose, what happened after that and what happened before that? The best lie detectors and the best and which lead to the best interrogators, really how they determine if somebody's lying successfully in the interrogation room is because they ask the same questions over and over. They ask the same question in a different way. They make the person tell the story and then tell the story in reverse. They make the person say the same thing over and over so that way they can check both the facts that the person is sharing and also the body language clusters whenever they touch on certain topics in the investigation of where they were, who they were with, or about a murder weapon or whatever it may be. And fascinating things do get revealed in those interrogation rooms, but that is a specific skill set of determining the lie and going after a specific detail, not just sitting in a room and saying, oh, you touched your nose, you're a liar.
Well, I've seen enough Law and Order to know that they have to ask the same question 9 times, and they rephrase it a different way. I mean, I tell people that's how they catch them because I tell people, it's hard to remember a lie. It's easy to remember the truth because the truth, even if it's a perceived truth, it's your perception of the truth. But if you believe it's true, it's easier to remember than making something up because that's how they catch you. They just keep hitting you over and over and over again until your discrepancies start to get suspicious.
Exactly.
So what I'm hearing from you is when we talk about observation, it's really not just observing them how they look, but what they're saying and how they're saying it. So when we move on to the connection phase, because we start gathering up that information about what's important to them, what do they value, what do they don't value, what really bothers them, what do they fall in love with, how can you make that connection smoother? Because I think that's a place where a lot of people fumble the ball a little bit, is that making that, I don't want to say a forced connection, but it's an unnatural connection because it's two people who may or may not know each other very well connecting. Like in business, it's your customers coming in, they're a stranger, they're coming in, and you're going to have to make a quick connection and rapport as quickly as possible. It can be a little forced.
It can be, and that really is determined by your framing while you're walking into that situation, your perception of that situation. For example, I have a client of mine who works at a spa, and part of her job at this spa is to sell product. I mean, that's how the spa honestly makes their profit. And so she had a real struggle with having to sell this product at the end of the session because that's just not where she gets fulfillment or joy through the product. She thinks that the spa treatments themselves are great. And because of that framing of how she viewed that entire situation, it created this false rapport. I don't know. It just didn't seem natural. It seemed forced. And so after she and I talked about it, I said, well, we talked about how could she frame it in a different way for herself. And she talked about how much she enjoyed seeing the clients get, the treatment, the quiet time for themselves, the rejuvenation that they feel. She enjoyed all of that. And I said, great, how can you bring that to them outside of this spa situation? It's with the product. And share with them how anytime that they use this product, that can be their quiet time, and that they get the chance to sit and, be just with their thoughts or clear their mind and enjoy the smells of these wonderful products. And because they can't see you every day in the spa, so what can they do in their own home life? And you not giving them that opportunity or that option, then they're only limited to this sensation, so to speak, in the spa. And once you kind of looked at it that way, then that conversation took on a whole different tone. Not only that conversation, but also her body language and how she talked about it. And when her own body language and tone shifts, then because of the beautifulness that is mirror neurons, then the other person, the client, would pick up on that. And instead of feeling this forced conversation, it's almost a little bit more eye-opening of oh yeah, maybe that would be nice. I mean, I really do enjoy the smell of this. And I can just see myself in my nice bathroom and putting on this mask, and it shifts the entire conversation. So how you frame it in your own mind plays a really big role. Also, as I posted today on Facebook about, oh my gosh, I'm losing it. Embodied consciousness? What is it? Cognition? Thank you. Embodied cognition.
You're welcome. I don't know what I did there. That was great. I'm so good. I influenced without even saying a word. I'm learning.
It doesn't be thinking my subconscious.
I'll take credit though.
You're
That's
my
okay.
subconscious, Craig. You're my subconscious.
That is the scariest thing we've talked about this whole thing. Cult leaders be damned. That was the scariest thing right there. So embodied cognition.
Which is basically the finding / study of the fact that our mind influences our body. So how we think about a situation changes our body's reaction to it, both in body language and blood pressure and sweating and all of these things. But also that the reverse is true, that the body influences the mind. So if you're nervous about something and you go in with nervous posture, nervous breathing, looking down instead of looking up, all of these different things, then you are reinforcing this nervousness. But if you're nervous about a situation and change your body language, and in fact, Amy Cuddy has a great video about this on TED Talk, that if you change your body's posture, your hormone levels change, your blood pressure changes, and your body influences your mind. So it's this beautiful mind-body connection. And also, like I mentioned before about mirror neurons, is when you make that shift in yourself, you actually make a shift within the other person as well. Because I'm sure you've seen, Craig, it's like when a speaker goes up, whether it's a new speaker or veteran, it really doesn't matter. But when a speaker goes up on stage and you can tell that they're nervous, you can tell that this audience makes them nervous, or it's a new presentation, or something is just really off. The audience feels that, and there's even more tension in the audience, and you're worried for the speaker, and already this is an unpleasant experience based purely on those first 5 seconds of the speaker's body language and tone.
No, I think it's about harnessing that nervousness, because I think if you're not nervous, and you probably agree with this, if you're not a little bit nervous before you speak, you don't care. And that's going to come off just as badly as being horribly nervous. So indifference and horrible nervousness are 2 turnoffs. It's really about taking these feelings that you have and harnessing them and using them properly.
Right. Because for some people, that nervous energy sends them in a downward spiral because they allow that energy to leak into their breathing patterns and the posture and all these things. And people who do well on the platform are people who you still, and I agree with you, I still feel nervous before getting up on stage. I feel nervous a little bit before this phone call. Like, you are on the spot. You know that other people are going to be paying attention to this. So it's natural to have a little bit of okay kind of a feeling. But knowing how to harness that from nervous to excitement, or just a different form of energy. It's all energy. It's just how are you going to, use it and conduct it.
Yeah, I like to think of it as focus, because so many people use it so many different ways. Because some people do take that nervousness and make it into energy and make themselves exciting and make all of a sudden their personality shows. I mean, I know a lot of actors do this when you see them and you talk to them and they're, hey, wow, this is great, woo, and then they're off stage and they're really low because they've taken all that nervousness. And then, like myself, sometimes I get sick to my stomach, not technically, but I mean, I get real nervous and I worry about everything. And then as soon as I step on the stage, I'm able to take all that as prep. I use it as prep because now I'm thinking, what do I need to avoid? It doesn't bother me to think about problems because it helps me focus on avoiding them, and then I can work my way through. I feel better knowing there's a bear trap on the 3rd square on the stage versus, I'm never going to hit it. I'll just wander around and be great. So for me, different personality styles use it differently, but we all take it and focus on what we're doing in our own way.
Right. Well, and what you just kind of described is the way that you frame the situation.
Yeah, I look at it as professional suicide every time I step on the stage. And sometimes I live through it and sometimes I don't. But we've lived through this. I know I'm the negative person, so I always have it looking like, it doesn't always have to be roses. I know I look at past experience and look how well I've done before, so I know it's going to do well, but I still get that, this could go badly, and I better figure out how it's going to go badly so I avoid it. And other people look at it and go, I'm going to focus on all the great things that I can do well, so all I do is my good things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important point to bring up, that anytime I talk about the influential techniques and influence in general, just communication or profiling people, I always let people know that the first lesson that I always teach is there is no good or bad. There is only effective or ineffective. So while I might not naturally suggest to my clients to look at all the problems of ways things could go bad, if that is effective for you, then that works. That's effective. For somebody else of a different mindset or perspective, that may be ineffective for them. It doesn't mean that that perspective is good or bad. It's just, it's effective in this situation and it's ineffective in that situation. I recently was at a networking event and I kind of felt like people were like, dance, monkey dance, where everybody in this group of people that I was talking to, one person learned what I did and they asked me to profile somebody and so I did, and then turned out I profiled like 5 people. And at each time I made sure that I said, first of all, everything that I say is going to be an observation, and neither of these are good nor bad. These are just simply observations. Of course, there are certain things that I observe that I keep to myself because it's in a public situation. I don't need to be airing out somebody's, I don't know, psychological dirty laundry or anything.
Yeah, it's not a television show where they go, like Sherlock, where he'll look at somebody and go, that person's cheating on his wife, and he'll say it in front of the lady, the wife. Right. He's cheating on his wife. It's quite obvious by the way his ring is turned slightly to the left and is exposed. Right. You know, you're not going to do that. Right. So that would be impressive if you did that.
But it's important that people take a moment. First of all, I think this discussion about influential communication is fascinating because, first of all, I think that you learn that we are all so similar, it's ridiculous. Like, our psychological hardwiring from evolution is so similar across all cultures, across all around the world, that we should find world peace by now, for crying out loud. We are so similar. The other thing that I find fascinating about it is as you learn about what influences other people and what is effective or ineffective with other people, you actually start to learn more about yourself. There's an introspective side to this that, oh, okay, in the past I've only used this, but I can grow and be more flexible and change my behavior to create a more effective situation with this other person. I can make these subtle changes in order to better connect with my fellow human beings. And I think it's a very fascinating process to go through.
Well, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to talk about, and I certainly appreciate your time. Shari, where can people find you if they want to talk to you more or even bring you to an event and have you talk about influence to their people?
Absolutely. So the hub of everything is at observeconnectinfluence.com. And there you will find links to my blog, to my YouTube videos. I'm also a regular contributor to entrepreneur.com. So you can see those articles there. And of course, my contact information is there, and you can give me a shout anytime.
That's the show. Thanks to Shari for coming on. You can email comments, questions, and guest suggestions to Craig at speakercraigprice.com. Please follow the show on Twitter at RealityCheckPod. I'm always looking for new guests, so please let me know who you want to hear on the show. Head over to realitycheckpodcast.com to subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next week.